Well, I mean, you look at the roster. The roster is it looks like one of the more complete teams in the NFC, certainly. There's not a position group that you really think, boy, the Eagles have a lot of question marks here. There were a lot of issues here. They went into the offseason with a lot of question marks, right? I mean, they went in with a linebacking core that was underwhelming. They went in with a huge question mark at cornerback, too. They went in with huge question marks at safety.
Welcome back, everybody. And it's weird being me in the host chair when I'm on with John Stolnis, because it's usually the other way around. Usually John's interviewing me. But how you been, John?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I cannot complain. Ready for some football?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I mean, it's been a long summer, and I think everybody's a lot more optimistic about this team now than they were at the start of the summer. So it's been fun.
Yeah. Why do you think teams have been so optimistic about the Eagles? And it's not just locally either. I think nationally, a lot of people seem to be buying in.
Well, I mean, you look at the roster. The roster is it looks like one of the more complete teams in the NFC, certainly. There's not a position group that you really think, boy, the Eagles have a lot of question marks here. There were a lot of issues here. They went into the offseason with a lot of question marks, right? I mean, they went in with a linebacking core that was underwhelming. They went in with a huge question mark at cornerback, too. They went in with huge question marks at safety. The defensive line needed some work. They didn't have a pass rusher that you could rely on going into the offseason, and they were woeful at wide receiver. And it looked like before the draft that it was going to largely be the same team in 2022 that it was in 2021. I remember saying that before the draft. Like the Eagles look like they're just running it back and hoping that the easy schedule will get them back into the playoffs. But then Howie Roseman on draft night obviously makes the A.J. Brown trade, and you draft your big defensive tackle, you get Nakobe Dean in the third round, and you're off to the races. And it's really been amazing, some of the additions that he's made, the impactful additions that he's made late in the offseason with Bradbury and then Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. So it's kind of funny how he's done a lot of his big work late in the offseason to shore up some of these holes. And you just look at the roster top to bottom, and you see that the Cowboys got worse on paper than they were at the end of last season, and you've got to feel good.
Yeah, John, this was weird to me, that whole leading up to the draft. So I remember I had a source tell me that A.J. Brown was or Jalen Hurts was at A.J. Brown's birthday party for his 2-year-old jersey. Right. I think it was jersey. I can't remember. But I'm like, okay, so what's the deal here? Like, I know they're buddies, and they're like, it's a little more than that. I said, what do you mean a little more? He said, I can't divulge anything. I don't want to mess anything up. And I'm like, wait, what? A.J. Brown's coming to the Eagles? And, he never responded back. So I just kind of kept it, in one ear out the other. And then, like, you start hearing some stuff like, oh, the Tennessee situation, this, that. I'm like, okay. So I kind of braced for it that it might happen, but
right.
It just never seemed like it was going to be a reality until the deal actually came. But you got to give Howie Roseman credit for stockpiling those draft picks and allowing them to get a star.
Yeah, and not only did he stockpile the draft picks to get himself a star in this draft, he also set himself up for next year's draft in case they still need to make some moves at the one position where I think they have the biggest question mark, and that's at the quarterback. But to be able to go get A.J. Brown this offseason, I think that's been the thing with Howie Roseman. So many of the moves that he's made, we didn't see coming. Right? We didn't see A.J. Brown coming. We didn't see James Bradbury getting released by the Giants and the Eagles going out and signing him. We certainly didn't see the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson trade happening. So a lot of the moves that he's made, we just didn't see coming. The Hassan Reddick signing made a lot of sense in the moment because you knew they needed a pass rusher, and you knew Jonathan Gannon wanted to play more of a hybrid defense, and Reddick lets you do that. But I mean, we were all looking at the wide receiver market, seeing all the trades that were going on for big name wide receivers. And you're looking at the Eagles roster, and you've got Devontae Smith, who is obviously a really good young up and coming wide receiver, but you're still looking at Rager in the 2, and you're still looking at Greg Ward getting regular snaps, and you're wondering, can Quez Watkins be the 2? What is his role? Where does he fit in? And you bring in A.J. Brown, and it just automatically changes the entire. It's amazing how one player can change the landscape of the offense. One guy can come in, and it puts everybody in the proper slot, right? So you've got Brown and Devontae Smith as 1A and 1B. And I think the signing we're kind of sleeping on a little bit too is the Zach Pascal signing. When they signed him, it looked like he was going to be the number 2 or number 3, and you're thinking that's a stretch. But when you've got him as your 4, that's a really good player to be your fourth guy, to be your one of your slot guys, to be an occasional outside guy, but a move the sticks guy, and just it makes Dallas Goedert a better weapon. It makes the running backs better weapons, and it really did transform the entire offense, bringing those two guys, Brown and Pascal, in.
I agree how we're underrating the Zach Pascal sign. I think people seem to remember Zach Pascal last year because obviously Eagles fans watch a lot of Colts games, and they saw Zach Pascal was ineffective, I guess. And I think that was more the quarterback because when he had Andrew Luck, when he had Jacoby Brissett, when he had Philip Rivers, this guy was getting a lot of tough yards for the Indianapolis Colts. And I don't know what the deal was why Wentz couldn't find him like all the other quarterbacks could.
Yeah, Carson Wentz is a mystery. Who knows? Who knows why anything happens or doesn't happen when Carson Wentz is the quarterback? And I'm sure in Washington this year, Washington fans will be saying similar things. You know, he'll have those great games, and he'll also have those moments that make you want to pull your hair out.
It feels like too. I'm a little higher on the Commanders than a lot of people, and maybe it's because I understand when Wentz is good, they can be scary because they have a good team. But it seems like in Washington, where it's the local beat writers, and I think they're a little more optimistic than most, but the fans just don't seem bought into this.
I have the Commanders making the playoffs. I picked them to go to the postseason. I think they'll finish ahead of the Cowboys in the NFC East, specifically because I do think you're right. I mean, Carson Wentz is a significantly better quarterback than Taylor Heineke. I think he has the potential. We remember Carson Wentz's last two games in Indianapolis last year, and we feel like the whole season was that way for him. When in fact, was he a Pro Bowl quarterback for Indianapolis for most of last year? No, but he did enough to get them in position to go to the postseason in a very competitive AFC. And I don't want to say those two losses were fluky for Carson Wentz because he played poorly and he legitimately lost those two games against winnable opponents. But for most of the season, and I know Jonathan Taylor was maybe the MVP of the league, and he was greatly aided by a running game that was really second to, I think, the Eagles' running game last year. And he doesn't have a running back with him quite that good in Washington. But I think he's got better receivers here in Washington. I do. And then, listen, Antonio Gibson was one, I think, of only 8 players to go over 1,000 yards rushing last year. I mean, raise your hand if you knew that. I didn't know that until I looked it up. And so I think Carson Wentz largely played well enough to win most games last year. And the Commanders' schedule is easy, just like everyone in the NFC East. And I think there's a good chance Carson Wentz wins them 9 or 10 games this year.
I get really upset when people knock Antonio Gibson. He fumbles the ball too much. Okay.
That's the issue.
Yeah, and Tiki Barber's done that. So, like, he can't correct that?
Yeah, I mean, you can. I mean, we saw Tiki Barber holding the ball up here, you know, for the latter part of his career. It looked weird, but, you know, he didn't put the ball on the ground as much. And so I would think that there are ways to coach that up. You know, show him tape of Tiki and make sure that he's keeping that ball away from defenders' hands and just getting stronger there, too. I mean, that goes a long way.
What are your thoughts on Ron Rivera? I actually put him – I had to do the preseason hot seat rankings for CBS with the coaches. It's a short list this year. So I put Rivera on it because I think Dan Snyder's a ticking time bomb. I mean, but overall, what have been your thoughts in Washington on how he's been doing?
I think Ron Rivera, as much as anything else, has helped them on the field. I think he's made them a more competent team, X's and O's wise, and on the field. He just hasn't had the talent in recent years to really be able to do anything. So I think he's a good X's and O's coach. I think he's a good presence, commands the locker room. I think he commands the respect of his players, which I don't know that you could say the same about his predecessors there in Washington. But the reason I don't think he's on the hot seat is because I think he is the public face the Commanders need with everything going on with the front office right now. He's a guy that engenders trust. I think his Q rating is really good because people trust him when he says things, and he has a track record of being someone that you can trust and that you can that he does things the right way, I think is probably the best way to put it. And so I don't think he's going anywhere, even if they win 6 or 7 games. I mean, I know Dan Snyder is Dan Snyder, and you can't put anything past him, but I think Snyder recognizes he needs Ron Rivera not only to coach his football team, but to be the face of the franchise right now. And that's the dual role that he's facing. I mean, the stuff that went on with Jack Del Rio this offseason with the comments that he made about January 6th and the Capitol and all that. Ron Rivera comes out and he extinguishes the fire. And that's basically what he's done since he took over. That's one of the main reasons they brought him aboard, was to be the adult in the room, in a room where there were no adults.
I had a friend tell me too, like they were seriously considering just getting rid of Del Rio, and I guess Rivera talked them out of it. And
Hmm.
you're right, that's the stabling presence of Ron Rivera and what he's brought to them. It seems like, and maybe this is good that Dan Snyder doesn't want this out, but all the stuff like I know Bruce Allen testified yesterday, I guess, but
Mm-hmm.
seems like all the egregious stuff Dan Snyder has been doing is kind of been swept under the rug because of the stabilizing presence Rivera has.
Yeah, and a lot of the stuff is with the commanders in the front office and the congressional testimony and all that. It's all happening behind closed doors. I certainly think things might be different if we're seeing Dan Snyder raise his right hand on C-SPAN and talk about what's been going on. They did have a public hearing
I
with
would
the
pay to
employees.
watch
And
that, by the way.
what's that?
I would pay to watch that, by
Oh,
the
for sure. Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, that C-SPAN, you could actually pay-per-view that thing. I think it would make some money. Yeah, it's that stuff being kind of off the front pages. They had the one hearing, and certainly was a black eye for Washington that day. But we'll see more things come out with Bruce Allen's testimony. 10 hours. He did 10 hours
way.
yesterday.
What time did he get out of there?
I don't know, but I don't know what you talk about for 10 hours. I mean, that's insane to sit and do anything for 10 hours. I mean, I can't fathom that, but
They did give this guy a bathroom break, right?
yeah, I'm sure they do. I'm sure he had some, I'm sure they let him have a pack of Munchables and and get on with his day. But it's, that team needed somebody to take a hold of it and really grab it by the shoulders and shake it into coming into this century. And I think Ron Rivera is doing that. And that's really his most valuable asset to this team is to be the grown up.
What's the progress on Washington trying to get a new stadium? I know it seems like they've been talking about that for at least 15 years.
Yeah, the problem is that FedEx Field, as everyone who's been there knows, is a land disaster. It's impossible to get to. It's impossible to get out of there. There's no parking. The stadium itself is brutal. So I think ideally the team would like to go and get a stadium in Washington, D.C. Frankly, the best place for it is RFK, just to knock that building down and build something new in the southeastern part of the city. The problem is that city managers don't like Dan Snyder, and they're not going to give Washington a new stadium until Dan Snyder is no longer the owner. So now you're looking at someplace else in Maryland, or you're looking at where I live, which is Northern Virginia. And they were talking about 2 or 3 sites within 15 minutes of my house here in Northern Virginia as potential spots for a new stadium. Virginia state legislators, some of them were warming to the idea, but I think a lot of these issues with the commanders and the workplace stuff and the congressional testimony and all that has scared off any Democrats in the state who might have considered the very costly process of putting a stadium up in Northern Virginia. That's been scuttled for now. So for the moment, it's status quo. There really is no movement on a new stadium for the Commanders at this point.
I was watching a 1997 game. I think it was between the Eagles and the I won't say the name. The former name for the
The
Washington.
R's. Yes.
Yeah. That's what we'll call them. And
Yeah.
I just think it's funny, hearing Pat Summerall say state-of-the-art stadium. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Jack Kent Cooke Stadium was a state-of-the-art stadium at one point.
At one point it was. I mean, it was that place rocked. I've been to a few games at RFK. That place absolutely rocked when those teams were good. It was a hard place to go in and win a football game. And that's just not the case with FedEx Field anymore. It was bad the moment it opened. I don't know who designed it, but there's one way in and one way out of that place. Like one entrance and one exit. It's beyond mind-boggling that they built that stadium the way they did.
And Snyder wasn't owner yet when they built it, right?
I think he was. I think that was Snyder's baby. But don't hold me to that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can't remember when he bought the team. I thought it was 99, but I'm not sure. It's been a while. But overall, though, when you look at this Commanders team, like you said, I think they have the potential to be a playoff team. I actually think 3 NFC East teams have the potential to go to the playoffs. But have you heard like this Chase Young? Did he re-injure his knee? Did he not? Did you happen to catch it on Twitter last night?
Yeah, a little bit. I didn't catch a lot of it, but I heard. I saw that there was some controversy about Chase Young, and the team is pushing back on that. They say that he could be ready to go. He could be physically ready to play before he's set to come off injured. Was he placed on injured reserve? He was, right? I mean,
yeah.
So he's out the first 4 weeks anyway, but they're optimistic that he can be back in time for week 5. So I don't know if there's any smoke to that fire or any fire to that smoke or whatever the expression is, but it does look like Chase Young, at least according to the team, will be ready once he comes off IR. But, with Washington players, with this organization, I think your best bet is probably to assume the worst. So with regard to any Chase Young rumor that you might hear, it's probably safest to assume the worst.
Yeah, exactly. Especially in Washington, because this is what I worry about this team. They had no linebackers. I mean, they brought John
Yeah.
Bostic back because they have no linebackers. Outside of Fuller and I'm just trying to remember where else starts for them now. Well, I'm losing it here. I think it's Thompson. but overall, they don't have anybody to back them up. Like Ben St. Juste is fine, but it's not like the Eagles situation with Avonte Maddox. It's not the Cowboys situation. I mean, this could really be their Achilles heel this year.
Yeah, I think really hoping Jan Davis can perform according to what at him. Kendall Fuller is a decent enough player, but they don't have a ton of playmakers unless Davis really emerges this year. And that's going to be that's going to be maybe the key to the defense is, first of all, making sure Montez Sweat and Chase Young are healthy, because Jonathan Allen can play. We know he can play, but making sure that those edge guys can get to the quarterback, and then they really need Jamin Davis to play, to be that playmaking linebacker for them. And if he can't do that, the middle of the field is going to be there. Dallas Goedert's going to have 150 yards receiving on that team when they play them, if they can't get something at linebacker. Yeah.
George Kittle said on Richard Sherman's podcast, he said Dallas Goedert is the tight end to watch this year. So he's probably the most underrated tight end in the NFL, and he expects him to have a big year. I mean, that's huge coming from a guy like George Kittle. But what do you see in Dallas Goedert that's going to make him that Pro Bowl level tight end?
Well, Howie Roseman said the same thing on WIP yesterday morning. He was asked about A.J. Brown, and he unsolicited said the player everybody's sleeping on is Dallas Goedert. And we saw Goedert, once Zach Ertz left last year and he became the high-volume tight end, he stayed healthy, which is the big key for Dallas Goedert, is making sure that he stays on the field for 16, 17 games this year. But when he's on the field, he's a monster. He's got all the speed in the world that you want from a tight end. He's got great hands. In his first couple of seasons, he had some issues with some drops and a fumble here and there, but we didn't really see that from him very much last year. And he's a guy inside the red zone who is a big target. So I think the Eagles are going to be much better inside the 20, and especially as you get down close to the goal line, because you've got a bigger target in Brown and in Dallas Goedert down there. He's a guy who could put up 7 to 10 touchdowns. I think you're looking at a 8 to 900 yard receiving year from Goedert. I don't think he's going to challenge the pass catching receptions record that Zach Ertz set a couple of years ago. I don't think he's going over a century in catches.
People are doing that now. Not even Travis Kelce can get close to that.
Yeah, exactly. But I think he's a Pro Bowl caliber tight end, and I think he has the potential to be an all pro tight end, be a first or second teamer.
Don't you think it's crazy how Zach Ertz goes to Arizona? He literally sets the franchise record for receptions by a Cardinals tight end, and he wasn't even there half the year. And Goedert does what he does in Philly. It almost seems like the best thing for both of them was to separate.
Yeah, it's a matter of having enough targets to maximize your opportunities, and that was the thing. I mean, as long as Zach Ertz was going to be here, he was never going to be relegated to a pure backup to Dallas Goedert. And so you move Zach Ertz to Arizona, some place where they could really use somebody, even with his diminishing skill set, a guy who can still be productive, and he's not going to break tackles. He's not going to get you the long gains anymore, but he's a guy who's going to get you that 8-yard reception, that 11-yard reception over the middle. He's still a great route runner. But in Dallas Goedert, you separated these two guys so that each could be the man in their respective places, and it definitely was the best thing for both of them. Sometimes a timeshare works, with the running back situation. You're hoping the timeshare that they're going to use, that they're going to works out, but at tight ends, there's only so many balls to go around. And with tight ends too, you want your second tight end, I think, to be more of a blocking tight end anyway, to act as like another blocker on the field for in running downs, and being able to run some more 12 personnel. I think what you've got with Dallas Goedert is a guy who has all of the talent, all of the tools. He's got his long-term contract, so he knows he's going to be in Philadelphia for a while. And I was very skeptical whether or not he could be a high-volume tight end. He had never shown the ability to be that before, but he'd never been given the opportunity to do that before. Last year he did, and I agree. I think he's a guy that could certainly be one of the best tight ends in football this year.
So you have Washington making the playoffs. You said Dallas is missing. Why do
Yeah.
you got Dallas missing it?
A couple of different reasons. One, first of all, the main reason is vibes. That team is emanating stinky vibes right now. The fan base is not happy. I think a lot of Cowboys fans and people who cover the team look at what the Eagles have been doing this offseason and lamenting Jerry Jones's inaction in a number of different places. They've suffered some key injuries. I think they've subtracted more than they've added. The wide receiver situation, I like CeeDee Lamb, but I'm not sure what Michael Gallup is going to give you when he comes back and exactly when he's going to come back. They don't. I mean, Dalton Schultz is a really good tight end as well, but he doesn't make up for the loss of Amari Cooper. I think there's still some questions as to who's getting the rock at running back. I know Dak Prescott. The one thing that Dallas has going for them is they have clearly the best quarterback in the division, and for the people who are picking Dallas, he's the reason. He's the sole reason that they are picking Dallas to win the division, because if you look at, and I just don't think you can expect the defense to create as many splash plays as it did last year. They created, yeah, and that's just not repeatable most of the time. That's kind of a fluky year-to-year thing. So I don't think you're going to see Trayvon Diggs have the interception total that he had last year. They do have good players on the defense, and I don't want to underestimate Dan Quinn, who's maybe the best defensive coordinator in the league. If not, he's certainly top 5. But I just look at what Dallas has done, and it feels like a team that's going to take a step back this season. It was a crushing loss in the playoffs last year. It's kind of carried over through an offseason of inactivity, and Cowboys fans are not happy. It just feels like you're always looking for, there's always 2 or 3 teams that made the playoffs the year before that don't make it the following year. And in the NFC East, we know that no team has won the division back-to-back years since the Eagles did it from 2001 to 2004. So I see no reason for that to change this year. And I just think it's not their year this year. They don't, to me, have the feel of a playoff team.
Doesn't it feel like Jerry Jones is saying Mike McCarthy up to fail?
Yes. And I don't know that he's actively trying to get. I mean, he can fire Mike McCarthy anytime he wants. He's Jerry Jones, for crying out loud. You don't need to waste a season of Dak Prescott's prime in order to get Mike McCarthy out of there. So it's mystifying to me why the Cowboys did what they did. It actually reminds me a lot of times of during the Andy Reid days when Joe Banner was the general manager, and the Eagles would just ignore certain position groups. They would ignore wide receiver year after year after year, and you go into the season thinking they need a playmaker at wide receiver. Why won't they get one? Why are we James Thrash and Todd Pinkston our weighing through the season every year when we don't have to? Go get someone, but they just wouldn't do it. They had better linebackers than the Eagles, than these recent Eagles teams have had, but they also ignored linebacker for a lot of those years too. I mean, there were just some spots where they just decided, nah, we don't really need to focus on this. And it drove me crazy. And it felt like that's what Jerry Jones's offseason was. He knows he has players who are injury prone. He knew that he was weakening the wide receiver position and just chose to do it anyway. And it's when you've got a quarterback in his prime like Dak Prescott, and you've signed him to this big money deal, and you've signed a bunch of these other veterans to big money deals, supplement it with players that you need to insulate yourself from injury issues. And they just didn't do it this offseason. And I can't figure out why that is.
You think Jason Pierce is eventually going to start at left tackle?
That's a good question. When he signed, it felt to me like we're signing a name so that the fans know we're looking like we're doing something. But I can't see how he's going to be a starting option for them. He just doesn't have it anymore. And so I don't know what their solution is at left tackle if it's not Jason Peters, but I just don't think it's Jason Peters. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they will. I don't think he starts week 1. I think they probably try out whatever it is they've got going on there now. But I don't think it's going to be Jason Peters. I really don't.
I saw Eagles fans get a little upset he signed with the Cowboys. And I tried telling them, I'm like, Randall Cunningham was on the Cowboys. I don't know if Eagles fans remember that. And as you and I both know, he was not good on the Cowboys.
No. When the Cowboys sign an Eagles player, it's generally when that player is all washed up, right? So I mean, I think that's probably going to be the case here too. Josh Ball is probably the guy who's going to get the majority of those snaps to start off the season, and I don't know if he's going to be able to handle that. So maybe Jason Peters does get some run here and there, but Jason Peters is not going to be an impact player for Dallas. I mean, and listen, guy wants to play. Let him play. He's a legend in Philadelphia. He's going to go into Canton with the Eagles logo on his bust. It's not betrayal. He's not a traitor. The man wants to play football. A team came and said, "Hey, we're going to pay you money to play football. Will you come play for us?" What's he going to say? No. It's like, no, well, I was on the Eagles for so long and the fans really hate you guys, so I don't think I can do it. That's not how professionals work. I mean, it's so if anybody is legitimately upset, and I don't know how many people are legitimately upset at Jason Peters about this, but if there are people who are legitimately upset about Jason Peters, just remember the man wants to work. And so let's let him work wherever anybody's willing to hire him. And then he can come back and he can be a lifelong special assistant to the front office in Philadelphia for however long he wants.
One thing I've noticed too between the Cowboys and Eagles rivalry, two things. One, I feel like the Eagles fans don't care as much about it as they did in the 90s because Cowboys aren't good anymore. And two, it seems like Cowboys fans really like to get or try to get in the Eagles fields because they know that the Eagles have been the better franchise the last 2 decades.
And I keep trying to tell Eagles fans this. This is not a special. The Dallas Cowboys are not a special team anymore. They don't deserve the level of hate that we throw their way because they're just not relevant. The Eagles have been more relevant over these last 20 years than the Dallas Cowboys have. That's clear. I mean, that's obvious. And you have to go back to the first Clinton administration to see when the Cowboys last made even just a conference title game. So this is not a marquee franchise anymore. The Dallas Cowboys, aside from the cheerleaders, aside from the big stadium, aside from Jerry Jones, they're just another team. So I don't like the Cowboys, I don't like the Giants, and I don't like the Commanders. To me, they all share an equal amount of dislike as division rivals. I don't hate one more than the other. I don't like any one more than the other, but it just I feel like we're holding on to this Tom Landry, Jimmy Johnson past when it comes to our feud with the Dallas Cowboys. And I get it. It can make these games more fun. And that's the whole thing behind it. Like if it makes it more fun, then great. But I think we just need to step back and take a look at what the Cowboys are and what they have been. The NFL has also done a great job of leveling the playing field for everyone so that really every organization has the same chance to be good on a year in, year out basis. If you've got a smart front office, any team can build itself back up from being a loser to a winner. Just look at the Bengals and look at the Bills and some other teams. I think the Lions are going to be a good team this year. You can do it. You can, if you're smart and you've got good coaching, you can build yourself back up and you can do it quickly. And so the Cowboys are just another team. They're in our division, and so they're extra. They're a little special in that way, and we have the history, but they're not special anymore. They do not deserve to rent a room in anyone's head.
Final question for you. So, do you think free agency had a lot to do with maybe the Cowboys losing that America's team moniker? Because it seemed like once free agency really took off, that not early in the night, like when Reggie signed, but when I would say late 90s when the dynasty was ending. It felt like the Cowboys have never really recovered from free agency really hitting its peak.
I don't know that it's free agency. I think that team has been plagued by terrible coaching. And frankly, the one constant is Jerry Jones making all of the football decisions. They also have had some bad luck over these last few years. I mean, the Tony Romo fumbled snap on the kick against Seattle. I mean, how does that happen?
We've seen Tom Hutton do that though.
Yeah, but in a regular season game, it's a little bit different.
Still.
Yeah, I get it. And then there was the catch, no catch against Green Bay in the playoffs, and the Cowboys kind of got screwed there too. So there's been some bad luck, but I think what's really hurt the Cowboys is they have done a terrible job hiring coaches, and they've done a terrible job putting together competitive rosters. And that all comes back to Jerry Jones. And I think when you look at why the Cowboys are struggling, you did have, you had Emmitt Smith and Michael Irvin and all those guys really before the height of free agency. Free agency was in effect for a lot of those years, but really, it was, when you're talking about 1990, 91, 92, 93, that was before free agency. And you're right. Players were Cowboys for life. Now players come, players go. You might start off with the Cowboys, and then when your rookie deal's over, maybe you go and you play someplace else. And we're seeing some players latch on for forever. I think Dak Prescott's going to be a Cowboy for life, or at least until throughout the best of his playing days. And the Cowboys do try to lock guys up, but it's not a situation I think where players also revere the star anymore. Players go where the money is. And so you'll see a player leave the Cowboys to go play for a team like the Cardinals or the Browns or someplace else, when back in the 25, 30 years ago, you would never see that unless a player was traded. So it's a different league. There are different rules, and the league has designed it so that one team is not dominating the sport anymore. And the Patriots are the exception. That's because they had one quarterback who was the greatest of all time.
And now they're all going to Tampa Bay.
Right. And now he's moved on to Tampa Bay. Exactly.
All right, John, once again, I appreciate you having you on. I'm going to have to get you on again, but it's great talking NFC East with you. I'll get you on during the season.
Sounds good, buddy.